This is INCRadio, DCEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo.
Don't underestimate
the power
of a single
conversation.
It could change your whole life.
INCRadio Chatline.
Conversations that matter.
Welcome to INCRadio Chatline. We thank you for joining us here. I'm your host for today, Nathan Russell, and we are going to talk about friendships, specifically losing friends. Now, it wasn't my intention to dress up like I was going to a funeral, so don't let that spoil the mood for today's show. But we do want to kind of understand the different ins and outs for why we may lose friends. There's, good and bad reasons for losing friends. And joining me today, I do have a wide viewpoint from different generations, from different backgrounds, to kind of talk through this. How do we lose friendships? Let's go ahead and start with, let's say, my partner in crime here in Texas. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Arnie here in Fort Worth.
All right, now let's go up to the hand state. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I was not ready. It's been a while since I've been introduced that way. Everyone, Tony from Michigan. Excited for the topic today.
All right, and bringing the noise from Illinois, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm gonna disappoint you because I'm not that noisy. Hello, I'm some General Cruz, live here from Rockford, Illinois, or Illinois if you're fancy.
And lastly, but not leastly, my friend from California. Go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, everyone. Melvi Tamayo here from Visalia, California, and I'm also excited about this topic and hope you'll continue to support us and join us in our conversation tonight.
All right. So these are actually friends that I've gained, so I haven't lost them yet. Hopefully we don't lose them. But I would like to start with, let's start with like from the beginning. Okay. So when we were in school, the friendships that we had in school, when we're little kids, I remember like a lot of those friendships, they were around like, who you sat next to, who had common interests at recess. Let's start with Arnie, because I think you and I kind of grew up close to the same generation. What were your friendships like when you were younger? Can you remember?
I don't know if we grew up the same generation. I think you're older than me.
Okay.
But it was different only because when I was growing up, there weren't a lot of people in school that was like me because, diversity wasn't popular yet at the time. And so it seemed like everyone at my school was different, whether it was their nationality and things like that. And so for me, I was kind of shy at first because I had never seen, people with the blue eye and the blonde hair. I was so used to seeing everyone with brown eyes
Right.
and brown hair.
Where was this real quick? Where was this, by the way?
In California, in Sacramento.
California. Okay.
Yeah. And so, I was fascinated with seeing different cultures and different nationalities. And so I would just go up to people and just start talking to them because these were people I had never encountered. And then I tried to speak my language to them because that's what my grandma taught us. And then they were looking at me weird because they couldn't understand. So I'm like, oh, I guess I have to talk to them all in English. So.
And I grew up, my dad was in the military, so I grew up around that. And so most of the kids that I grew up around were also in the military. We did live in base housing for a while. So just to talk about the neighborhood, it was, base housing is not the nicest. All the houses are kind of joined together, but it is absolutely safe when you're living on base. And I remember a lot of us were like the same age because in the military, when you're a certain rank, you're going to be around the same age and everyone has kids around the same time. So I remember always having like lots of friends to play with, in the neighborhood, which was always nice. But I lost a lot of friends like constantly because with the military, you're always in and out. I mean, I lived in California, Hawaii, and Florida, moving around with my dad. I don't know, for some kids it can be different. Um, but Arnie, what about in your neighborhood? Did because I know you and me, we kind of grew up before like cell phones and tech. Did you have a neighborhood full of kids that you hung out with?
We did, and we would be out all day long. You don't go come home until the sun goes down. And like you said, we didn't have the technology that we have now. And so, it's either, hey, we're going to meet up here at this time, and you either show up or you don't. There's no way for you to call them to say, are you on your way? Are you coming? And so you just play with whatever kids show up.
Melvi, what about you? Was it similar or different for you growing up?
Very similar with what Arnie actually mentioned because I was born in the Philippines. I was there until I was in fourth grade. And in fifth grade, my family and I moved to Saipan, or you can find it along Mariana Islands. And then from Saipan, we moved to Guam. So just like Arnie, I was also enamored by all the, different races, different ethnicities. And I was also shy growing up because I was still trying to learn English and I was really, really scared of talking to people because I didn't want to be made fun of. And so I was just really a reserved person. But in the Philippines, though, again, just like Arnie mentioned, we have a meeting place at a certain time and we don't go back in the house until the sun is already set or late at night, even until like 9 o'clock at night. Sometimes I get in trouble because I'm stubborn like that and I just want to continue to play with my friends. But yes, I didn't have a phone, we didn't have technology. As a matter of fact, we only had one small TV when I was growing up in the Philippines, and therefore we spent most of our time playing outside, engaging with the other kids, and just having a great time. Had a lot of friends when I was young.
All right, what about you, Tony? You come from a younger generation. What was it like growing up for you and the friendships you had?
For some reason, when I was listening to Melvie and Arnie, I was just thinking about the idea of going to school and not having another like Asian friend around at first, right? I feel like in the area that I grew up with, it wasn't super diverse until later on in my life, probably like high school. Because I feel like growing up, when I would introduce everyone, like, oh, I'm Filipino, and they'd be like, oh, what's that? And I would try to like explain, like, oh, we're from the Philippines, even though I was born here. Like, I didn't migrate or anything to the States, but I just do remember not having a lot of, I guess, Asian or Filipino friends or people knowing about that until I was fortunate to have my cousin come to the States, and she was like my first best friend that I got to have throughout school. We attended school together from I think fourth, third, or I want to say, oh no, second grade actually up until college, up until high school. So she was like my first like best friend that I had that I could like relate to compared to all my other friends. Not that all my other friends were not as significant. I did have a lot of great friends growing up. um can't really relate to the meeting spot thing. That was after my time, but what we did do was just go over each other's houses before like cell phones were introduced and everything. Like I just remember in elementary school, we would make plans to go to, it was usually people coming to my house as opposed to me going to other people's house. They would come to my house. Um, but once I was in middle school ish, high school, that's when the phone thing started coming around. So we would be able to meet up places and actually tell each other what time as opposed to deciding on a place. So yeah.
All right, to you, EJ, what was it like, your situation growing up?
No, actually, I was relating to what you were saying earlier about like like when with like that military life stuff for you, right? Like friends kind of come and go. And for me, well, my dad's not in the military, but he's a minister. So, uh, like we move around, like I would say yearly or every 2 years or so. We move to a different place. And while I did have like, I would say I have a lot of like I had a lot of friends, growing up. It was also easy to kind of fall out of contact with them because again, kind of grew up, growing up in the Philippines back then. The internet wasn't as popular as it is now. Now it's like like even if you go there, it's easy to keep in contact with. with your friends. But back then it was the internet wasn't really a big thing yet. So keeping in contact with like the friends after we moved to like a new locale, it's like it was nearly impossible. So yeah, I'd say I made a lot of friends. I made a lot of friends growing up. But once you move, you kind of just accept that okay, probably won't see them again. you know.
You mentioned like keeping in contact, and I had one best friend growing up. From the elementary school days. He was just a grade higher than me, but we were always hanging out every day. We hung out. You couldn't keep us separated, but because we were both military kids, we did get separated. Because he moved away first, he was actually able to write me letters. We actually kept in touch, like as pen pals, writing letters. That's how far back we go. Not to say that we didn't have email. Email was just starting. Like I remember sending an email to my friend like at school using the school's like network, using like the black screen. It's like the Matrix, and you had to like know
Wow.
pseudo, you didn't know like pseudo programming to send an email back then. But yeah, we actually did keep touch for a little bit until like both me and him happened to move, and we lost each other's addresses completely. And I lost touch with them for like 20 years. Facebook, though, on the other hand, I just on a random whim, like I wonder if I could find my friend on Facebook, and sure enough, I did. And we reconnected on Facebook, and we caught up. And I thought it was neat how even though we had separated ways, we kind of grew up into the same things as if we, never were apart. Basically, we got into the same things growing up, and it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like we all kind of grew up the same. And fortunately, I was actually able to have lunch with him. So we caught up. Then we both happened to be in Florida at the time, so we caught up and had lunch. So I thought that was nice. So as far as like anyone else, does anyone have a case where they've been able to keep in contact with a friend from your youngest days? Does anyone have an example?
Define keep in contact, like regularly talking to them, or just you have their contact.
I'll leave that up to you. I mean, it's a conversation,
How
conversation
how
that
young?
matters.
Because I would say I have friends I frequently talk to like that I knew from like high school. Not always, but like like frequent enough. I would say that like, but that's already from high school because I can't remember my friends' names from like elementary or preschool. Can't remember their names anymore.
So
It's
for you,
a time
EJ, is
ago.
it just like Facebook that you keep in contact with some of your
Yeah,
most
yeah,
youngest friends? Have you ever
yeah.
like met them in real life ever again or
Well,
reconnected?
no, because most of them are in the Philippines. Well, all of them are. All of them are in the
Okay.
Philippines.
What
So,
about you, Tony?
so yeah.
Since we kind of segued off.
Well, I'm bad at this. I feel like I'm trying to find a line that there isn't really a line for it, but I feel like there's people that I'm definitely still connected with through social media, whether it's through Facebook, through Instagram, and not surprisingly in a bad way, but sometimes you kind of didn't realize like, oh, that person liked me enough to friend me on on a social media platform after. Because growing up in school, right, a lot of these interactions are pretty casual. I would say, you go to a classroom, you sit down with them, and you're bonding for maybe like a semester, maybe, just depending on how your school system is set up. And then you go about your way, and then these people make connections with you through social media afterward, and like, oh, this person actually thought of me as their friend. That's nice, as opposed to acquaintances. So in short, I feel like I'm connected with a lot of people from my childhood. Whether I would go out and have dinner with them to catch up with them, I feel like that's different levels, just depending on who they were in my life at the time. But I would say I'm still connected with a lot of them, but not all of them. I think I would have a sit down and try to catch up with them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a little bit harder because, back in the Stone Age, we didn't have all this technology. And and so
You beat
and
me to
so
the punch. I was about to say like, did you have any friends like where you rode dinosaurs and stuff? But go ahead,
no,
go ahead, go
we
ahead.
didn't write dinosaurs. But So we didn't have this technology, and like Nate said, if we didn't write letters and stuff like that, it was really hard to keep in contact with them. And even now, for my elementary school friends, I remember their first name. I just don't even know what their last name is, so I wouldn't even have to know how to look for them. But as I got older, especially like in high school, when we left the Stone Ages and we're in a little bit more modern age, then I do have one friend that I keep in contact with like on a regular basis from high school. And so whenever I visit Southern California, we make it a point to like see each other. But we text each other on a regular basis because he's not all into the whole, doing messages via social media and everything. So a lot of it is still texting or calling every once in a while, and then hanging out whenever we get a chance. And then ever since he got married, then it kind of makes it harder because now, it's now when I guess when people are married, they got to ask their spouse now if they could go hang out as opposed to them just hanging out before. So I think like different circumstances also plays a factor on what happens with friendships.
We're actually going to talk about that later too. But Melvi, what about you? You ever reconnect with any of your friends from when you were a child?
Yes, and they found me through social media. So a lot of them between maybe the age of 5 to 10 in the Philippines. So I've reconnected with them. One of them specifically, we did keep in touch all the way when I left the Philippines. And then when I was in Saipan and Guam, growing up on both islands, my friends and I kept in touch all throughout the years. And I was the first one actually among the group of us, or four group of friends. I mean, there are four of us. We have different ages, like 2, 3, 4 years apart from each other. And I left Guam. The minute I left, the following year, two of them joined the military. So when they joined the military, we kind of didn't keep in touch. And then the one that was left in Guam, we kept in touch. So she and I, did what we did in through social media, writing letters, to phone calls. I mean, name it, any source of way or ways of being able to keep in touch with friends, we did it. And so until now, we're still in touch. However, I met them not too long ago, I believe probably 2 years ago, after being separated for almost 26 years. So, just like what you mentioned earlier, Nate, when you said it feels like we never separated, so true. And I'm a believer that when you grow up with individuals, or when you have that strong bond between friends, no matter the distance, and even if you don't talk to each other, let's say you just think of each other, because they're all now too married except me. And so they got their own lives going on. But believe it or not, they're so good at keeping in touch with me instead of me keeping in touch with them. They check up on me to see if I'm okay. So I'm really grateful to have them as my lifetime friends up to this point in my life. And everyone else, we just occasionally would talk. They would ask me. Some of them I can't recall, and I feel bad. Just like Arnie, I know their first names, but then when I look at them, I kind of recall the memory. But with so many people that I've met throughout my lifetime, from moving from one location to another and up to this point, it's really hard to remember everybody. But I'm glad that they remember me, and then they'll just let me know what kind of memory we shared back in childhood years. And I would just say, oh, yeah, okay, I remember now. You were so and so, and we were neighbors when we were kids. So it's nice to also have that recollection and reminisce the good old times, or the Stone Ages, Arnie puts it. Stone Age years. So
I want to talk
yeah, I
about
do. Yeah.
I want to talk about like after high school now, because from childhood, but like high school, it's like a different situation, because from there everyone kind of jumps off into becoming an adult. And I know from like some of my friends that I grew up with, like super immature in high school, and so then when they are forced to go to college in the real world, they have to kind of grow up quickly. And I know that like for myself, for some reason, I know this, like after high school, there were some of like my friends in high school, like I didn't want to see them again. I almost felt like, all right, I'm done with this phase of my life. I'm really taking my life seriously. I want to, because I was really immature in high school also, but I knew it, like, I'm a kid. not trying to be an adult sooner than I need to be. But then as soon as like I was ready for that, I felt like I was ready to also cut ties with most of my friends that were in high school. And I remember like running into them, occasionally like in town and feeling like, oh, I really don't want to confront this person or see them, or even seeing them on social media. And I'm like, I don't feel like adding them because it just like reminds me of that, I guess, immature time. Does everyone feel the same way or different about that? Arnie, what about you? When you left high school, did you ever intentionally cut off ties with people?
I didn't intentionally cut off ties with anybody. We just lost touch because, some people went off to college, some people didn't. Everyone's life became different. And so, like I said, I only kept in touch with one person from high school, but everybody else, no, I mean, I see them on social media every once in a while, but, I don't go like out of my way trying to find people.
And how close of a friendship did you have? Because I know there's varying degrees. Were you like just mild acquaintances, basic friends, best friends? What?
Um, Not really best friends, but it it was my partner in crime where we would do fun stuff to other kids and they probably didn't think it was fun.
Were you a bully?
Well, it wasn't anything bad. It wasn't anything bad, like, it's just, the silly things you do when you're in high school. But everyone in my class was an honor student, so we had to make class fun. It couldn't all be about academics. So like I said, we mainly hung out in school. We didn't hang out like outside of school because back then, your parents didn't believe you could have friends who are guys that are just your friends. So I was kind of not allowed to hang out with guys as friends.
What about you, Tony?
In terms of like shifts with friendships
Yes.
or like falling outs, I feel like it's never been necessarily intentional for me because your brain sometimes can only keep up with with so many relationships, right? Especially as you're moving through life and people just get added to your life in different ways. I don't know that it's ever been intentional, but I've had a lot of falling outs, whether it's just because we didn't get to keep up the communication through the years, or we just moved on to different things. Um, there are people that I would like to reconnect with for sure if given the opportunity or the chance. Are there some people that maybe not? Yeah, probably just because our values are different. We don't see the same on certain things. So um, I think that happens. That's like a normal part of life, and that might have been a part of life that was dear to me at that point because they probably helped me through some things and just the fun that I had with them. Like I'm thinking of a friend group that I had back in middle school that we were a really tight group for those 3 years. But then once we got to high school, we all kind of went about our like, and it was just a 1 year change. It was so quick, and it just happened because one went to a different school, and then but if given the opportunity, I would love to reconnect with them. But it's not something like what Arnie said. I'm not necessarily going out of my way just because there's a lot of relationships I think to keep up with at a time that you're trying to take care of, right?
Right. That's a good point. I can totally agree with that. That just life happens. You have to be able to keep up with it, and there's just some friends that just can't stay top of mind. But I found that like reconnecting with some of my really good friends, even though we don't talk for like a long time, and then all of a sudden they come out of the blue. It's like what Melvi said earlier. It's like, we were never really apart. It's like, yeah, cool. And I feel like that has to work both ways. You can't really hold it against somebody because life does happen. So when it comes to friends, just know, just like how Arnie said, sometimes they get married, situations change, they have to focus on certain things, but it does help to kind of be open to that, to reconnecting with others without holding it against them for falling out. But EJ, I wanted to turn to you and your thoughts. I know you've moved around quite a bit,
Mhm.
but have you ever felt like breaking ties against uh with your friends that were maybe like in high school, your school friends?
I mean, I did. Like even before, before we were moved here, and before moved here in the states, like sometimes I would see like friends I knew from like elementary, and like they were my friends, and I would say we never really had like an argument that would be like, this is the end of the friendship. Like we never had one of those. It was more like I was scared that they wouldn't remember me. So I just, even when I saw them, I kind of just purposefully took like a different route to avoid them. Or like even when I see them like on when I saw them on social media, like on Facebook, I didn't, like I didn't add them, like I didn't send them a friend request. So I was like, what if they don't remember me? Or because, like, and this is, I'm talking about like the people who I'm friends with them, but we don't talk a lot. So I'm like, do they consider me as a friend? Like, if I send them this friend request, is it not gonna come across as weird? You know?
I know exactly what you mean because it happened at my friend's wedding. I was there, and
Mhm.
someone approached me and they were like, "Oh, hey, it's you." And I was like, "I don't know who this person is," in my head. And they even asked me like, "Do you remember me?" And I was like, "No, I don't. I don't remember you like at all." And by the way this person was speaking, like we hung
Mhm.
out and had like a great time. And I'm like, I don't remember this person
Oh,
at
see,
all. Okay.
see,
Hopefully
that's
that
my
wasn't you,
fear.
AJ.
That's my fear. That's my fear of like me approaching them or adding them like on social media, and they just say, "Wait, sorry, who are you?" Like that's my fear. So like even when I saw them, like when I saw them on the street or saw them on social media, I just didn't interact with them. I wait for people to add me first in social media to approach me first.
Well, I
And I
think
was like,
like
oh yeah, you remember me
when you
too.
were younger, if you were to hung out with them, quite a bit, I imagine
Mhm.
they would remember you because I remember a lot of my friends, even though it was only a brief time, but if we had hung out like at
But
school, I can recall them, maybe not by
mhm,
name, but like in the case where I didn't remember this person, it was because they knew my
mhm,
friend who was getting married, and I think we only hung out like once, and that's why I couldn't remember
mhm.
them. But I think like
on
they would have remembered you.
on what Tony said though, because I did have those friends where like I like it that by the time that I was with them in class, like we hung out like a lot, but like they were moved to like different sections, like a different is like how in grade school, high school, you can have like different classes, different sections for like your class. You have like 1A, 1B, 1C, where like every time like when we get moved to like different sections, they find like a new friend group, and like it's also kind of awkward now to approach them, even though just a year ago you were like, you were like part of like that same friend group, you hung out a lot, but now it kind of feels awkward to try and relate to each other because I would say when you're, I don't know, when you're younger, you kind of like experiences just it's like one after the other, right? It's like it's so fast paced that in a span of a year, there's a lot of changes like in your likes, your personality, right?
Now I
And
don't know if
So it's
anybody
easy to
else
do.
can relate to that, like in high school, because everyone goes through like clicks and changes. But I remember
Mhm.
like because music was such a big thing, and that was creating dividing lines with friends. Like here's the punks
Mhm.
over here, here's the kids in the metal here, here's the kids who don't care. And I knew some of my friends they had grown apart because of that, because they liked a certain band that all of a sudden they didn't like this other person. And I remember thinking like by the yeah, I remember thinking by the time I was like a senior in high school, I'm like, that's kind of petty, and I was like, I'm not doing that. I don't care about that. But Melvi, I wanted to check with you. Uh, have you ever intentionally tried to avoid or cut off friendships from those that you were younger with?
Yes. And when they find me on social media, I press delete.
I'll leave them on. I'll just leave them on
Well,
the request.
put it this way, it's one of those where if I know I'm not going to have the time to give attention to, and I think they've mentioned it here on the chat. Growing up, I've realized, and as I've gotten older too, that it's so much better to have a small circle of friends that you can keep in touch as you get older and throughout your lifetime. And in high school, or let's say from elementary to middle school to high school, I had many friends. I got exhausted. And some of them were good, some of them were bad. And yeah, some of them I did give benefit of the doubt because some of them did apologize to me on social media prior to making an or prior to requesting for me to accept their friend request. And so some of them I don't remember anymore. I don't recall like what you and EJ mentioned, like who is this person or when did we meet? What kind of memory is this? I can't recall. So they know of me, but I've already forgotten about them. Because when you're moving from one place to another, it's so easy to forget people that are okay, not to be mean or anything, that are not memorable because you just have these occasion times that maybe you played together, you talked for a bit, but then you weren't the friendship didn't really blossom to where it would become a lifetime friendship, right? And so the ones that I have now, that are ones that I've mentioned, the four of them that I mentioned earlier, those are my lifetime friends. Everyone else, of course, just like us here, we're now also having this bond, and you're now also my friends. So hopefully we stay this way. But yeah, you're right. I had to avoid some of them because they weren't good to me or they weren't nice to me. Like, why am I going to bother so that what they can be mean to me again? No, I'm not going to let that happen. I've also learned to put a boundary to where if they're adding me in purpose, because it happened to me, well, I actually accidentally clicked and add a friend. I don't know what I was thinking. I think I was tired. And then all of a sudden I got this ugly message. And so I said, ooh, I really need to be careful of who I'm adding to my friend's profile and whatnot, especially in social media. Because, like I said, I can't remember everybody. We can't remember everybody that we meet along in our lives or throughout our lifetime, but the closest ones we treasure and that we've built already a strong friendship with them, of course, we keep them for life. But yes, that's my experience.
Now, Tony, I want to go back to you. You had a violent reaction to when I said friends can grow apart because of music. What was that?
I didn't think that that was a thing. Maybe that happened in a time in high school. I don't remember experiencing that specifically. I feel like people were more divided just on their interests, but not necessarily in a clicky way. Like you had closer friendships probably with those who you were constantly surrounded with. Like I had friends who were in band, right? But they were also friends with, jocks and stuff like that. And all of it kind of melded together. So I can't relate to the whole division just because just because one liked metal and then one liked punk. That's kind of crazy to me, especially as a music lover. That's wild. I don't think I could. My friends like music that I'm not crazy about, but I could never. I don't think I could do that.
You do have a point because I do had most of my friends who were like in band and were in on the football team and whatnot. They got along just fine. It was my music loving friends. I guess they were just snobs. Everyone knows like a music snob friend. They're gonna judge you if you don't have a certain musical taste. And that's probably why I cut them off. I'm like, I don't know if I want to be friends with somebody who's going to be this judgy. I heard what they said about like some of my other friends, but I want to talk about more on examples of how friends can have a falling out. Um, so think of one, and then we'll go around. I'll start with myself. So my best friend, one of my best friends growing up. I mean, we were always hanging out. We were the same age. We were into the same stuff. Um, we were so close, and we stayed friends through elementary school, middle school, high school. We kind of grew apart a little bit for a little while because he was like a prep and I wasn't, and so we grew apart. But then we by our senior year we were BFFs again, and then college we were BFFs, and then after college we were BFFs, and then he got married, and then I never heard from him ever again, and I don't know why. Um, for me, I'm just waiting to get a text or something from him because he's back in Florida, and every time I visit Florida, like I never run into him, even though we have like the same friends and everything. I don't. know if he kind of dropped off, because I know some of my other friends that know him. He kind of dropped off with them too. I don't know why. I'm not holding it against him. I'm just waiting for like the day he's gonna finally text me and be like, "Hey, let's reconnect." It's been like over 10 years since that, but it's been since he got married, and I don't know what happened in that situation. But let's go to you, Arnie. What are some other reasons friends can have falling out?
Um, I mean, there's lots of different reasons. How you view different things. But for me, I had a really best friend that I had in elementary school, and everything was great. And then all of a sudden, she stopped going to school, or I don't know what happened. And then later on, I found out that I guess her parents had split, and so they took her away and everything. So I never got to see her again, and I think that was really hard for me. And so as I was growing up, I still made friends, but I made it a point not to get like extremely close to somebody because of the fear of them leaving. And so sometimes it's the distance that breaks up friendships. And then other times it's, with social status where people don't think you're good enough for them anymore because you're not as rich as them or you don't do the same things they do. So I think that's sometimes you lose friends that way.
What about you, Melvi?
I had a best friend back in high school that I thought, we had a strong bond. Unfortunately, I didn't know that she too had so many issues, and just like Arnie with her personal life and so on and so forth. So I really did my best to really help her get through whatever she needed. Just me being there, being present, being someone she can talk to, she can confide in. But for some reason, I wasn't resonating with her anymore, and so she found another group of, she calls it, cooler friends, who wanted to do other things because I was just a simple, naive. She called me simple. You're naive. You don't do cool things. You don't do this anymore. You just sit there and do nothing. That's all I got from her. And so she finally left the friendship and went along with other people. And it just hurts me during that time because I spent so much time and effort trying to be there for her. Only in the end, she just left me hanging and went with other group of friends. So, but I guess you can say it was also a blessing in disguise, because then I ended up venturing out other, just other things to do in life, like picking up hobbies, playing sports, spending more time for myself, and also found new friends that that we have a lot of things in common, and that we did, hung out and had a wonderful time together, and we were just, helping out each other in everything that we do just to get through high school years. So, you know things happen and life happens. I still think of her, actually up to now, that hoping that she's fine, because she went through a lot, and I was very, very concerned for her, and I just wanted her to do well in her life as well, but the feelings weren't mutual, so I let her go.
And
And
Renz had typed something in the chat that kind of similar to that, where he said that in high school, there was a group of them, four of them, who were good friends, and they lost two because the other two wanted to hang with the cool kids, even though they were not actually cool kids. They were more into doing bad stuff. But that's how you lose friends, is because you may not have the same values, and so you tend to separate.
Yeah, that happened to me in high school with one of my best friends. We did reconnect. He's one of the few friends I stayed connected to though after high school, because we were in the same band and we we had different music tastes. Here we go again with the music taste dividing friendships. He wanted to play one type of music. I wanted to play another type of music, and we fought a lot. But fortunately, like I gave up on musical taste later on for that. But what about you, EJ? Are there any other reasons why you lost friendships?
So this happened in like uh, high school, where it's like my first year, and this is like the first friend I made in high school. And granted, this is like also a new place for me, because we just moved to a new place, and like I don't really know anyone in this new city, in this new school, and this is the first friend I made in that school. And well, being like being best friends, I lent him like one of like my favorite video games. Like, because this was before video games became digital. You have a physical like CD, like a physical CD that you can use to install the game. So I lent him that. I lent him that one. And this video game in particular, it's special to me because it was a gift from my dad, like for my birthday. So like that particular game, that was like kind of like my favorite for that reason. And I lent it to him, and he said, I'll give it back to you after I install it. So I asked for it the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day, and he just kept saying, "Oh, sorry, I forgot to install it on my computer. Don't worry, I'll give it back to you." And that kept going for months until I got like really mad, and I told him, "Dude, just give it back, because like that, like I don't really care about the game, but that particular like that CD, that case, that everything that like has sentimental value to me." And he gave it back. He gave it back eventually, but he wasn't happy to give it back, and you can tell by the way he kind of just like like kind of just like threw it at me like that. and and no, that wasn't the thing that got me like saying, okay, I think this friendship's over. It was like after that, I just started hearing rumors about me, about how I'm not gonna use the words he used, but like how I'm this really bad person, And I think one of the words he said that I can use is stingy. Like he called me stingy, and he said a lot of other stuff about me, like that I would just hear from like other people, and that for me is just kind of like when I said, I think this friendship's over. But it
Do you
was
think it was a
actually that.
misunderstanding? Do you think it was a misunderstanding though?
Um, maybe like looking back on it, maybe he was expecting that I would just let him keep like the video game. But honestly, like I said, I didn't really care about the game. It's just like that physical, the physical object has it has sentimental value to me because of like the context behind of it like being a gift, you know, to me. So like it would like I would have just picked any other one of my video games to trade with him if that's what he wanted. I would have just given him another game to keep, just so he can give me back like that physical object that's sentimental to me. But yeah, like I guess I'm not really sure what I don't know what really set him off, that he didn't like what I said. So yeah, like but honestly, it wasn't that. It wasn't that he was rude when he gave it back. It was what he did afterwards that made me decide that probably isn't like the healthiest friendship for me. But I would say on a positive note though, like it was that falling out from that friendship that kind of steered me towards like the friends that I made and kept for like the rest of like my high school years, where like it was a similarities on, we both like drawing, and so I kind of just fell in with that group, and we spent like kind of like our high school years making comics. Right.
Going to you,
And
Tony. Did you ever lose friends because they happen to like a different wing of the wizard school that you're a fan of?
No, I know what you're talking about. No, there's mentions of a lot of different things. We could list a lot of different reasons, and everybody has different experiences in terms of friendship losses. But I think the one that's always sucked for me is when it's kind of like a ghost. Like it's not even just a drifting moment. It's just like you don't know like what you did. And I think that one is kind of frustrating because you have to find your own closure, and it's happened to me. And I know that there could be those who are on one end of it, like you could be the ghoster or you could be the ghosty, for whatever reasons. People have their reasons, and a lot of the time it might not even be about you. That's something that I've tried to come to peace with, is like it might not even be about me, the reason why that happened, but just the initial trying to deal with that is kind of, I feel like, the worst out of everything. Because if I, let's say I get in a disagreement or conflict with someone, at least I can attribute it to something, right? Where it's just like, oh well, they didn't like that, we didn't like the same music, or we didn't, whatever it is. But on the other end of that, the ghosting, it really sucks. Just because you feel like there's no room for um, reconciliation, just because you're communicating, but then the other party's just not, like, nada, nothing. So that's one of the that's probably the loss that sticks with me the most, if ever, Nate.
And I think for me, when one thing that sticks with me is when you're actually being honest to your friends and they don't like your honesty, and so they end up like not being friends with you anymore. Like when it comes to relationships, if my friends are going to ask me, what do you think of my man, I'm going to be honest. If I don't think they're good enough for you, or if I think that you should go date somebody else, I'm going to be honest and I'm going to say it. And so some of them can't take that, and then because I've lost a lot of friends that way, and then they end up not ending up with that person anyways, and then they try to come back, and I'm like, I told you that's how they work. But they don't listen.
I want to switch over to maybe like changes in values. So I know the number one example I could think of was on my rugby team. I had a lot of friends that I made on the team. You play together, you work hard together, and I remember being really good friends with one of the older captains on the team. And I remember when the like pandemic hit, and he went crazy over the pandemic. Like he was really like going after with other people with his opinions, and I just could not stand it anymore. I'm like, I don't like that he has such strong opinions and he's willing to let his opinions be more valuable than his own friendships. And I had to cut it off with him. I was like, I can't be friends with this person anymore. Can anybody else relate to that, changes in values where you had to cut it off?
Well, what you said, and honestly, what we've been talking about, like, definitely made me think of this thing that, like, this, it was a short video that I saw like a couple of days ago, saying, like how, or like saying that to look at love not as an emotion but as a choice. And I'm like right now I'm applying it to to friendship, because there might be friends where like you still care about them, right? You still care about them, but then you have to make the choice of, like, I can't really be friends with you anymore, because like for you, what you said about that that friend from like the rugby team, right? Like, and there might be like that, uh like what I said, like those friends who you still, like, if you look deep down, you still care about them. I know Melby said earlier, right, that she doesn't talk to that friend anymore, and they had a bad experience, but like she still cares about that friend deeply. Like you might still care about someone, but it's that you have to make that decision. Like this, I can't be friends with you, or like maybe not really friends, just acquaintances.
And to add to that, what Renz had typed in on the chat, where he says people are easily persuaded now with what's hip and trendy, that they throw away relationships easily. And I do have to agree with him on that, because like you said, either our values change, or people think they just have to be cool, and so they don't seem to treasure friendships or relationships as much.
What about you, Tony? Have you found that values can separate friends, changing values?
I can see that. I've seen it happen, just because, when, especially as when you're getting older, right? And maybe there was things that you were okay with in the past that you are no longer okay with, right? That's, I think it was Melvi who mentioned it earlier, that you kind of set these boundaries. And it, to Arnie's point too, when you communicate with your friends what your boundaries are, when you communicate with them, this is something that I'm okay with, this is something that I'm not okay with. It's going to be up to them ultimately whether or not to accept what you've just said. Just like even to EJ's point, like it's a choice. I can accept that you like metal music, and I can't change I can't change your mind. Like that's what it is. But I'm not going to be aggressive towards you in that manner, or try to fight you on it. Like I'm just going to accept you as you are as best that I can. And when it comes to friendships too, as you grow, I've realized that it's also natural that there will be different people in your life that will bring you to different levels, if that makes sense. Like there's certain, not that they're there to um necessarily be something that you gain from, but kind of in that way that they they nurture you to a point, and then sometimes you don't get to take them with you to the next point that you're going to. And that happens, and sometimes we can't control those things just because of a lot of different factors. Sometimes it's distance, sometimes it's life, sometimes it's also people passing away, and we go through these things, and we can remember people and hold on to the things that they've taught us and those memories. But whatever it is in that current moment, I can't remember who mentioned it. I don't know if it was Renz earlier in the chat that was mentioning it can be really hard to keep up with all of the different things. So if you have a focus in your life that you're moving towards, and you know what's important to you, the people that you surround yourself with should elevate that focus, right? It shouldn't be just anybody that you want to put there just for the sake of putting you there. If they're not helping you in being able to be encouraging, if they're being that kind of, if they're being a hindrance to the thing that you're trying to pursue, that's probably not somebody that you want to keep close to you. So in terms of values, I would be careful, who you, especially because these people will influence your life.
Yeah, I agree. Because like on my rugby team, we're only there because we all play the same sport, but everyone comes from wildly different backgrounds and they're into so many different things. And some of the things, like, yeah, I don't really approve of necessarily. So, but still, like, on that team, we can set those aside at least and accomplish something, that involves teamwork at least. But yeah, for some things, like, you have to be able to draw the line. There's certain things just like, no, I'm not going to go along with this. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to agree to it, and I'm not going to be around, if you decide to continue to pursue this. But let's kind of shift gears. What about reconnecting? So I actually have a story going back to my best friend that I brought up earlier that I've been trying to reconnect with. I remember me and my friend group. So we were in college and we were always hanging out. I think it was high school slash college around that time. And I remember he got a girlfriend, and I remember he disappeared for like a bit. And I remember our attitude towards it was like, all right, yeah, he's doing that right now. We'll be waiting for him though when he eventually breaks up with this girl, because she was not a good person. I hate to say it, but that was our attitude. It was like, all right, you can go, yeah, sure, but we're going to be waiting for you when you want to come back. We will always want you to come back. And that was kind of always our attitude towards, our best friend group that we had, that we always wanted to reconnect. And fortunately, with like social media, it's convenient to reconnect with somebody. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on reconnecting. Arnie, what do you think?
For me, if given the chance to reconnect with older friends, that's something I would do. But I've come to the point where I have friends who I don't see on a regular basis since I'm out here in Texas now. But we do make a point that when I go to California or when I go to the East Coast, that we actually spend time together. And the cool thing is, if they're really your friends, or how we say friends who are family, then it doesn't matter like how much time passed or whatever distance there is. When you get back together, as if no time has passed and you just picked up where you came from. And so, for me, that's how it is. I don't I just try to surround myself with a very small group of intimate friends, no longer looking to try to find, thousands of friends anymore, and then just make sure to keep those relationships strong.
All right, we're getting close to the end. So, EJ, any other final thoughts?
I would just want to say that definitely reconnection is always, a possibility. I wouldn't say just because, you've kind of, grown apart from someone or maybe even had a falling out with them that reconnection is, impossible. I would say as long as you're both alive, there's a chance, right? So I do want to say you keep that door open, right? You keep that door open. And even for me, like even the friends that I've fallen out with, maybe friendship didn't end, it didn't end as cleanly or as well as I would have wanted. But and like, even for them, I still have hope that maybe someday, maybe someday I'll be able to reconnect with some of them, or hopefully all of them. But
And to you, Tony. Any final thoughts?
Well, I was going to read Oliver's comment, but EJ kind of already said it already about keeping the door open. But he also said, make sure there's no negativity in my heart. So even with the losses, right? Even with the losses, like you don't keep yourself in a negative place. Like you don't harbor that hatred. You don't harbor that resentment. Like just being able to accept it for what it is and be optimistic about what could still happen. Possibility. Always thinking in possibilities.
All right, I would go to Melvi, but we lost her. We lost one of our friends. No, I'm just kidding. She had to drop, so she sends her best. But from what I'm gathering, though, if you were friends with anybody, you would have had some similar values at least. And if you had disconnected from any of your friends, and you're wanting to reconnect with them, there's a really good chance they want to also. So if you really want to reconnect with any of the friends that you lost along the way, reach out to them. Try to, especially if they're in town, try to schedule some time to actually hang out. Um, our friendships here in life are probably going to be some of the more meaningful things that we have and will remember more than material things. I remember that when my friend happened to be in Houston, even though it's 4 hours away from here in Fort Worth, I said I will drive down there 4 hours just to hang out with you for the day and then drive back, and it was completely worth it to be able to reconnect in that way. So reconnect with your friends. They want to reconnect with you. We thank you for joining us here on Chatline. Hopefully you gain some new insights, and hopefully you get a chance to reconnect with some old friends. Thank you for joining. We'll see you again next week.